What it do, everybody? It's your boy King Crowder, back again with another edition of history that you may not know and history that is not taught for sure. Today's lesson will take place and the focus and the concept will be on the Freedmen's Bureau. What is the Freedmen's Bureau? The Freedmen's Bureau was an organization established by Congress to help the formerly enslaved get freedom, medical services, clothing, shelter, and help those that were displaced post the Civil War after the Black Americans won their freedom. This was to help people that did not have homes that were transitioning out of enslavement. The Freedmen's Bureau was headquartered in DC. It was mostly located in Confederate States, which is known as the South. You got to understand, this bureau gave out food, medical supplies, and to those who needed them. It was founded in March 3rd, 1865. What we do not know about in health and history, y'all, is when this bill and this Freedmen's Bureau happened, it was immediately successful. It was so successful because all the skilled tradesmen, craftsmen, and labor force were formerly enslaved. Now they were free. What we do not talk about in the historical context is that they transitioned out of that period into becoming self-sufficient immediately. What do I mean by that? I mean that these people had the right to build, take care of themselves, fish, hunt, and invest in their communities. Most people do not realize that the staff of the formerly enslaved already had those skill sets to become themselves. The white people of this time already worked with them. They enslaved them, and they did not have to fend for themselves because they didn't have any labor to do anything. So literally, when you see these blacks begin to disperse all across the United States, most people don't know that most blacks in America lived all over in small communities because they built and established themselves. That's where the freedom towns come into play. Hopefully it's connecting. One major thing that nobody knows about that is a highlighted piece about Freedmen's Bureau that I think is incredibly important is that these are how most of the major black universities began. They were given a plot of land, and these blacks that were poor, uneducated, same terminology we hear to this day, knew what to do with that money when they got the equal footing. People might not know that when they began to get these huge wins, they purchased families. They purchased land. They began to get married traditionally. They began to have families, and they began to establish their own communities. Howard University, Fisk University, University of Tennessee, and my alumni, Hampton University, all were founded on the Freedmen's Bureau legacy. You got to think, these education things will begin to establish because they began to put their money together and build up their universities. As they begin to build up those universities, that's how the enrollments in the physical labor, blue-collar work began to establish. You send your young boys up to Hampton, they get a culinary, architectural type of degree, they come back and work for their communities, the legacy builds, repeats, rinse, wash themselves. So you got to understand, most black Americans at this time were completely self-sufficient and had their own way of thinking and ideology. Even though that the racism and other things were going on during this nadir period in America, most of the hatreds from most of the white people we don't realize came from primarily envy and jealousy because these people that were once enslaved began to flourish immediately. When they were flourishing, you begin to see the results. If you were once my slave and now you have built the whole college and my family has never been to college, how do you think that makes me feel? Think back for a second and analyze it. Once these type of things were happening in real time and they began to see people that were formerly working for them against their wills flourishing out the wazoo, they felt some type of way. Let's be honest. So once we begin to know that these black individuals begin to flourish, you begin to hear the rumblings coming about. Why do they need the Freedmen's Bureau if they're over here prospering? Why do my tax dollars continue to help them if they're already self-sufficient? We need to cut these programs. Mind you, these programs are supposed to be in existence much longer. But we began to see most of the main American media have an impact and hatred towards this. So the bill ran short. And you began to see people take, steal, and pillage from their Freedmen's Bureau the resources they had left from these black Americans. What do I mean happened? Those black Americans established themselves primarily, and we began to see their money just ripped out the root. So the program that was self-sufficient, helping, building up these legacies, all was gone in the blink of an eye. So once these blink of an eye was gone, you must understand That's when the heavy pursuit of Jim Crow began to go up. They are doing better. We're giving them more. They're overachieving with the meager resources we give them. That's when the problems began to start. The reason why this Freedmen's Bureau need to be studied and analyzed, because you must understand, we always hear those stereotypes and different things being mentioned. But once you're given the adequate resources, most Black Americans generally take off and help themselves, self-govern themselves very well. If we look at how history and the story have been repeated, they help, they grow, the envy starts, it knocks it down. You see that constantly being repeated time after time. President Andrew Johnson, abandoned the program, removed all the National Guards from the South, and basically left those Black Americans in hostility where they had to deal with white terrorism and hate crimes being going actively. The story of American history is truly a beautiful one. We must understand why these incidents were the way they were, what caused it, how did these happen, and what benefits and still lingering process do we see. So think about it. The Freedmen's Bureau came. We got universities. We got major land grants. We got more families. We got more establishment. Post that success, we began to see more racism. That's when we saw Jim Crow. That's when we began to see the Great Retreat, which we will diagnose in a later video. The Great Retreat breaking up how when they began to push on those Black Americans, push them off their land, causing them to move off their land and things they had purchased. Knowing this story and how successful the Freedmen's Bureau was, we will begin to see how this lesson plan will repeat itself. It's your boy, King Crowder. Chime back out, y'all. Hopefully you learned something very interesting and powerful today. I think the Freedmen's Bureau is something that we mention a lot in U.S. history and legacy, but we don't emphasize enough. Please comment, subscribe, and like the channel, and I'm gonna holler at you. Peace.